welcome to Lea's and Lorelei's Lorelei Logel-Demoulin and Lea Schmitt session here at the GITA Unconference, where we are working towards a world in which all development and application of science and technology contributes to a good future and well-being for the coming generations, finding the other. And in that spirit, most of you unmuted, so thank you for that. Most of you have your video on, thank you for that. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand or just post it in the chat. You've likely heard this before, and you are likely aware that this will be recorded and shared on YouTube and other channels. And towards the end, I will not share anything because this is the last session of the day. And with all that said, I would like to hand over to Lorelei and Lea, and thank you very much for being with us. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I'm trying to share my screen, and as always, it's not really working, but I'll find a way. I'm just going to start by thanking you all for being here. It's Friday, 5 p.m., and you might be more keen to have a Feierabend beer or something. So thanks for being here with us. We'll try to make it nice and interesting for you. It says that Lea is my guest, but it's not really true. We prepared this whole thing very much together. And maybe now it works. Does it work?
Yeah, it's loading. All right.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, maybe I just start with a short intro of myself and then hand over to Lea so that we get this started. As you see the title, it has two elements in it. So mobilizing crypto tools and wealth for the greater good, a reflection on next-gen venture philanthropy. And basically I'm coming from the venture philanthropy side. So I've been, let's say, working in the impact space for about 5 years now, started in a corporate impact investing fund, worked in several startups, and now joined a Berlin-based venture philanthropic fund called Social Business. So this is not a very corporate talk, but this is where I work at the moment. So of course, a lot of the reflections that developed on the topic come a bit from there. And at Social Business, I'm in charge of partnerships and fundraising, which means a lot of connection to other players in the impact space, but also finding the funds that we need, because what we do at Social Business is to give out loans to social businesses. So let's say early stage or young startups or SMEs that are in the global south and that are providing essential services to the most vulnerable, be it access to water or nutritious food or electric mobility. It's very broad, but this is what we do, and this is where I come from. And I'm just gonna let Lea introduce herself.
Hey, my name is Lea. I have been working for the past few years now at Centrifuge, which is a company that's located more in the crypto space. So what it does is it basically allows it allows companies to bring their financial assets on chain and finance them using crypto. So we have these two sides. On the one side, we partner with businesses, companies that need financing, and then on the other side, we work with different liquidity providers more in the organized finance space. And what I do there is I'm responsible for partnerships that are on the financing side. And in particular, the past few years, I have been working with a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And we're already starting with all the buzzwords already. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview what that actually means in just a bit. And it has been, maybe just for framing. So Lorelei and we have known each other for quite some time now, and we have been working in our individual spaces also for quite some time, but actually only recently we started talking about where there might actually be overlaps or where we could leverage something from each other's industry. So this is a little bit of the framing for this talk, and yeah, happy to walk you through our thinking here.
Thanks. So just here we're talking about impact and tech, and impact is a very, very broad word. So I'm not going to try to define it here or to shrink it, but just to give you a bit of perspective on where we come from. So as I said, my day-to-day job is to find enough resources to make sure that entrepreneurs who are trying to fight the huge problems of our time, be it climate change or wealth inequality or poverty, get the resources that they need to actually do their work. And so it's not just impact for the sake of it. There are nice things called the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals that we all committed to, and it's not just on the impact sector, whether you take charities or NGOs or social enterprises to work towards it. It's a commitment from us all as a global community. And so to address those problems, make a dent against the climate crisis, and help people get out of poverty, it just takes resources and money. And at the moment, there's a huge financing gap to reach the SDGs. So it has been assessed that we're currently missing $2.5 trillion every year to reach if we are to reach those SDGs on time. So the question of the financial resources and the question on how we mobilize enough resources to reach those SDGs on time is actually a crucial one. And so without going into too many details, I'm going to use words such as charity or social business or social enterprise a bit interchangeably, but this is a very broad space, and there are just different ways of achieving your goal, right? So if we're talking about, basically, if you're trying to solve an environmental problem, this is your focus, but you have different ways of getting there. You can have a business model that is very much revenue generating, and then it's self-sustaining, and then the question of finding funds is not that tricky. So you can be a traditional company, go to a traditional bank, or raise money from traditional VCs, and so we're all aware with how these things most of the time work. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there are some issues that are just much more complicated to solve with a sustainable business model. So everything that is related to more infrastructure-like. So whether we're talking about early childhood education or water access in regions that are extremely remote and where just something needs to be built, and it's just similar to state infrastructure projects. They're very costly and the return on investment is not clear. So just to say that there's a broad spectrum. The space that I work in and that I'm most familiar with is somewhere in the middle. So what we call social businesses, and we as an investor, we're investing for impact. So we're focused on social businesses that solve a social problem or an environmental problem, and financial sustainability is a tool, but it's not the main focus. So they're using financial sustainability to get there. So this was just a short briefing to explain where we position ourselves on that spectrum. And basically, as we said, whether you have a self-sustaining business model, that's great for you. But if you're going to need more funds, if you're going to need patient capital from investors, if you're going to need grants to be able to reach your beneficiaries, provide education to young children, or provide safe water, or provide renewable energy, or install solar panels in off-grid communities. There are all those great things that you can do and that tons of organizations are doing. And that's not what we're talking about today. We're going to let them do their work. We're going to focus on how do we make sure those organizations actually have the money they need to do the super important work that they do. And I think this is when I hand over to Leah. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So thanks for sharing a little bit about your space. I will be talking about the space I'm working in, and that is called DeFi. And DeFi is basically the term, or it stands for decentralized finance, and it really encapsulates different types of financial applications that are built on the blockchain. And it is, maybe you can look at it as a little bit of an evolution of what everybody is probably most familiar with Bitcoin, where the overall purpose or what this community is striving for is to remove intermediaries when transacting in the financial space. And with DeFi, or like where it is most active, or like where the most things are happening, is on the Ethereum blockchain. And with basically the addition of smart contracts just allows for more complex financial products to exist, more than just like sending funds from A to B without any intermediary, any entity actually interfering or sitting on those funds. And you basically you own your own data, and you own your own you own your own funds. And why we started talking about this is that this space has been growing quite a lot over the past couple of years. It's still a really young space, but it is actually quite fascinating to watch what has been created in that space. So on those financial products include decentralized exchanges where cryptocurrencies can be swapped. There's also lending platforms where you can, on one side, earn interest. So if you own cryptocurrencies already, you can park it. There's almost like a savings account, but just on chain. What you can also do is lock up collateral, so lock up some of your currencies or assets that you have and lend against it, so take out a loan. And the beauty of it all, or what the fascination, or like what many fascinates and drives into that space, is that you can basically, what you need in that space to take out a loan is basically just an Ethereum address, and there's no KYC. You can just enter any application. And on top of these that are probably more familiar for anyone here in that space, there's also new concepts that have emerged. And I think this has been a huge driver. There's on one side liquidity mining and yield, or like you can also, some call it yield farming, which basically means it has been a tool used by many different protocols and many different financial applications in that space to entice users to go on their platform and actually make use of it. So what that means is, if you provide liquidity on, for example, a lending platform, and you lock up your liquidity there, you would receive a token, or like their native token in exchange. So on top of interest, you would also receive another cryptocurrency, for example, which just doesn't really happen on your normal banking account. And then on the other hand, what's like making this space a little bit crazy at times, but also so interesting and fascinating, is that everything's open source, and it's the way it's set up, it's very composable. So some people call it also money Legos, which sometimes I find a bit cheesy, but basically what that means is, like, theoretically anybody could build on top of another financial product, and there's no entity that's like stopping you from that. And I added this chart here on the right side, which just shows on one side how small, like how young the space still is, but also how much it has grown within a really short period of time. The measurement in DeFi is TVL, it's total value locked. And basically what that means is like how much value in USD is locked in that space. So you can see that that only actually the summer last year, it really picked up. And when it was in October, or like for the most part of 2020, the TVL was hovering around like 5 to maybe 10 billion, so like still considerably small, and then just really skyrocketed with some of those new financial applications that I've been mentioning, for example, liquidity mining. And then in beginning of this year, actually, it just really went through the roof. And at that time, it was really difficult actually to lose any money in that, or like to not make any money in that space. And currently, I looked it up just today. The current TVL of DeFi is around 83 billion USD. Maybe you can go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, cool. So while that being said, it's a super fascinating space. There's just two things that I and probably many others have also been observing, and this is actually what sparked that conversation with Lorelei, is that on one side, it very much feels like DeFi, and that space is still running in circles. And what I mean by that, it's really staying within this own bubble, and it's all for the longest time it has been basically like one token or like one cryptocurrency been moved into another protocol, and then you would receive another cryptocurrency, but like everything crypto native and everything staying within this bubble without actually having any real application or not really reaching any use cases out of that. And also what is quite interesting to see also is that everything's more or less like correlated to Bitcoin or ETH. So if the price of Bitcoin goes up or if the price of ETH goes up, I mean, like Bitcoin and ETH are also correlated, all the other tokens also go up. So it's a very, as I said now 3 times, it's a very little capsule or encapsulated little space. And for those who want to know a little bit more about it, I actually gave a talk about it end of last year, where I expand a little bit on that. I linked it here. Maybe I can share it later on as well. So in a nutshell, what I want to say here, what I bring across here is that it's great. It has been growing a lot. It has gotten a lot of attention, but overall, how much real life impact it had was still, or is still, very limited. And I think that technology can be leveraged for a lot more. And maybe you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and another observation, which was really difficult to miss. So over this past year, and especially beginning of this year, there was just an immense wealth created among, on one side, crypto entities, but also individuals. So a lot of people made a lot of money, and it is all in a demographic that is very young and that is super fast moving, very dynamic, and also quite interested in just like what's going on in this world. And I want to highlight this one example. So Lorelei has mentioned it earlier. So there's on one side impact investing, but there's also like charities and donations. So thanks for sharing it here. And what I wanted to point out here is that this one rather shiny example of just a few months back. I think maybe some of you have, when you heard about cryptocurrencies, you also heard about the currency called Dogecoin, and it has been shielded, it has been pushed by Elon Musk on Twitter for some time, and this also sparked other cryptocurrencies or like other spin-offs to come into existence. And one particular one is another dog dog coin, basically. And I know how ridiculous this all sounds when I talk about this, but bear with me. So there has been another cryptocurrency that has been, that came into existence, which is called Shiba coin. And the way the creators of this currency set it up was that they had one very prominent receiver of parts of the funds, and they set it up in a way that a very large portion of that cryptocurrency would go to Vitalik, who is the creator of the Ethereum blockchain. And basically a lot of he was sent a lot of money, and he actually decided to not keep that money, but donate it to a crypto fund, to a crypto COVID relief fund, which was just shortly before set up to actually take donations from the crypto space and mobilize this wealth and actually use it for something good, to help relieve the situation in India when COVID was ravaging across the country. And I know this all, this is a very flashy example, but it does show that there is a lot of wealth that's sitting across individuals that also are willing to share. Like, I'm not expecting that any charity will receive a donation from Vitalik, but overall, there's a lot of fast-moving goods. And one thing that's also interesting, maybe to like share in this regard, and that Lorelei will go into a bit deeper here, is that because everything was happening so quickly, that the receiver, so in this case, like the manager of this COVID crypto relief fund, and he at some point, he was really quickly confronted with having to actually manage those assets. And he received funds that were on paper worth it was like estimated around $1 billion US. And this was like a highly illiquid currency that if you exchange all of that, because your receivers of the donations don't expect them to actually receive a Shiba coin or any other silly coin, it has to, like, what they still have to do is exchange it to USD or to the local currency, to rupee in this case. So what they're then suddenly also were confronted with is like how to actually manage this treasury, how to manage those asset funds. So there's quite interesting dynamics that are happening here, new challenges that are arising here. And with that, I would hand over to Lorelei again.
Yeah, thanks so much for all those lovely Doge coins and various dog names. And actually something that Lea mentioned that I want to just highlight, the fact that a lot of wealth has been created in the space, and that traditional philanthropy, I mean, charities and major organizations have long gone to, let's say, more established wealth to fund their work. So to larger families or to entrepreneurs that have already done a career. And in that case, we're talking about a much younger set of people who might also be just more, acutely aware of the challenges, be it around the climate crisis, be it around wealth inequality, because we're just talking about this today much more than we were a couple of years or decades ago. So there's definitely a challenge in creating a bridge between this wealth that exists and find a way to mobilize it for organizations that are doing super important work for the climate crisis or against poverty. And basically, I'm going to go very down to earth here, but the very first step and the very basic thing you need to cover is how do you make sure that you can channel the funds from the crypto space to the traditional nonprofit sector, or let's say impact sector? And what I'm telling you here is nothing new, really. Some people have been looking at it for a while, and NGOs such as Save the Children have already been accepting Bitcoin since 2013. So there are early adopters everywhere. But still, we're totally not in a space where there is a space that is called crypto philanthropy, and everyone knows how it works, and the bridges exist, and we can just make the most out of it, which is why I'm going to take a case of how one connection can look like. So when we're talking about bringing those two worlds together, what can it look like? So if I take the example of UNICEF, so United Nations organ that basically takes care of the protection of children globally, they started their own crypto fund in 2019 already. And what's interesting about what they did, so UNICEF in general is very advanced on that topic. They have their own blockchain lab, and they're really interested in cutting edge technologies and how this can help their work, make their work better and more impactful. And so basically they started this crypto fund, and they received funds from 3 major donors, one of them being the Ethereum Foundation, which is the entity behind the currency Ether that Leah mentioned. Not really behind, because it's not really centralized, but we can get to this later. And what's interesting about the UNICEF Crypto Fund is that they receive funds in crypto, and then they disperse them in crypto as well. So that's one of the few organizations that chose to work like that. And what they do is that, so you can look at their website, they have a nice tracker where you see the funds that were received and where they also invested the funds. So this is, of course, one of the really nice aspects of handling cryptocurrencies, is that the transparency and the traceability is great, especially and actually only if you keep cryptocurrency and you just don't convert them. And what they do is that they work, basically they make these investments in charities or startups that work on open source projects, on data handling, or that use cutting edge technology and that can basically handle cryptocurrencies. So this is one example how it can look like if you're just an organization that creates a vehicle who wants to receive cryptocurrencies and then continue spending them as cryptocurrencies. And just you can see the little bubble in the bottom right. Of course, if we're not talking about the connection between the traditional impact space and the crypto space, if we're talking just about the crypto space, there are really cool initiatives there as well that remain very community-centric, but where they have been giving grants to projects for be it internet access or freedom of the press. There are really nice projects that have been run, but it's really just not that well connected to the traditional impact space and the work that is being done there, which is why we thought it's still worth going a bit deeper on that. And so if I take a very practical case, as I told you, some organizations have already started accepting donations in crypto, many actually. And if I to just do a little case study to give you an idea of what it means, the German NGO SOS Kinderdorf, so they're basically also working on the space of children's rights protection and giving children food and education and covering other basic needs. They have just a website where they have links to their Bitcoin and Ethereum wallets, and they can receive donations directly. What they do is that, as opposed to the UNICEF, they convert it to traditional currencies, to fiat, right away. So they're not interested in holding these cryptocurrencies. They convert it. They are working with an Austrian startup called Bitpanda they do conversion on a bi-weekly basis. And of course, it's the nice aspect, can be seen as a nice aspect, as it's fully anonymous. The donor can remain completely anonymous, but there's also no tax deduction possible that goes together with this. And if you've ever tried to send funds from the US to an entity in Germany that is a nonprofit, and then you have local entities in Uganda or in Kenya or in India that need to then also process the funds, the nightmare administratively, but also just the cost that it generates. And so, of course, having such a cheap and fast way to have international transfer is a great asset for such an organization. But there are some things that organizations should be careful about. This is not in any sense a legal briefing or whatever. It's really just trying to understand what are still the hurdles today, and why not more social enterprises or charities accept cryptocurrencies. So the first thing is that, of course, if your donors remain anonymous, it has limits because you cannot just receive such large donations that you would require for your work. Because at some point, to keep your nonprofit status, you need to be able to prove that your money doesn't come from money laundering. You need to have some KYC processes to show where the funds come from. So this is, of course, something that needs to be taken care of. You also need, of course, a very good accountant. The moment I started discussing this topic with my colleagues and organizations, they were like, just please try to make not our Steuerberater quit, because we really need him to stay. So this is all very interesting, but might be a bit tricky. And Germany is not the most lenient jurisdiction on that topic. Of course, if you go to Switzerland, to Portugal, other jurisdictions are just more supportive in helping nonprofits process these funds in a non-bureaucratic way. But then there are also some questions that you should keep an eye on. And this is something that Lea touched upon. Can I, as an organization, process cryptocurrencies, or do I need to convert? One having more aspects on more positive aspects on transparency and traceability on the funds, but the other just makes it easier to integrate it in your day-to-day processes. And if you keep a coin in itself and you don't just convert it, you basically say it as an investment. You keep it as an investment because, of course, there is volatility and you're not sure about the price of the assets we'll have in the future. So either you consider it as a donation and you just convert it and you keep your traditional your fiat, or you keep it in crypto. So that's also something that's that an organization should keep an eye on. The question of course, which currency do you accept? And the point that we raised already, how do I actually reach those potential new donors? And of course, it requires this new fundraising strategy, because it's just a whole new pool of donors that I think organizations are not used to talk to. And as you can see also on the right side, there are some platforms that started addressing this problem already, and basically we're trying to provide a tool set for charities or organizations, mostly charities actually, also universities or faith-based organizations, to help them get started and help them with the process, help them better understand, and also start to look at mobilizing wealth from cryptocurrency owners on the other side. So, but it's still very emerging, and which is why feel free to have a look at these organizations. They're doing really cool work. But I think I can pause here because I think we were trying to cover a very, let's say the basics with that one. And would like to hear from you if maybe you have ideas or thoughts about that, because what we would then take some time to do if we have some more time now, would be to look at, let's say, once we've covered the basics, what are more exciting ideas? What are more kind of moonshots or experiments or things where the tech is not necessarily completely ready, but we see that there would be a really cool use case or great potential to actually bring the two sectors together even closer. But I'll just pause before we continue, if anyone has questions or thoughts.
Well, thank you first of all.
And thanks for the translation. Yes, Steuerberater is a tax advisor.
We're a very small group, so I would just suggest unmute yourselves and just go. So the floor is to the audience.
I mean, we can also just put this here as a starter for the discussion. I don't know if any of you have heard about some of those cases before, but should we just walk you through the three quickly? I think I'm gonna try, and Lea, whenever I start.
Yeah, we have one comment actually from Jürgen.
Want to read that out, Lea?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah, I can
read out myself if you want.
If you want, yes.
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Wonderful to hear another human voice. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm hearing you very difficult at the moment, so I hope I'm coming through well.
Yeah.
I'm on a mobile connectivity today, traveling, so I'm sorry for that. We found it very difficult actually to find those people, and we're talking to family offices, and there we find some of those people who made a wealth somehow and talk about philanthropy. And then when you talk about philanthropy, it's getting quite interesting because there's two ways of doing philanthropy. The one is actually what you said, and it's an issue in Germany, and I know it, but it's outside Germany less an issue, is anonymous donations. Philanthropical projects of their own. But if they have a lot of money, then they talk more and more, and I find that quite interesting about impact investment, which is not anonymous at all anymore. But it's very difficult really to find them. We stumble over them if we're out on the outlook for funders, and we stumble over them, and we have quite a good network. And this is an industry, the crypto millionaires, billionaires that are coming up. They are very anonymous. It's very unknown who they are, and to find them. So it was just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the why people are so fascinated by the space is because like so many financial applications or like so many things are accessible to them without actually having through like KYC, AML, and all these things. So I also see this as a limit. So for example, at the company that I work with, where companies actually also receive their funds through crypto, they actually also have to prove where their money is coming from. And so all of the investors that come through our platform, they have to go through KYC, and we also see that many are reluctant. There are obviously, of course, people that go through that, but yeah, it goes against the ethos for some that are acting in this space, for sure.
I think it's also because I don't know how you find them. They find you usually, right? It's my experience, right?
That depends. But we work with different types of liquidity providers. So on the one side, we have retail investors, and these are actually those that come more to us. And then we also work with institutions or like institutional funds. That for them it's a longer process. For them it's also actually like it's also a longer learning process, and also KYC takes longer. And then we have these more like decentralized liquidity protocols, which is like a whole other can of worms. I would say it's a mix. I don't know if this like answers your question, but it's definitely a mix.
But I think one of the challenges also of, and one of the reasons why it's important to just make it more mainstream and make it easier for charities or organizations to reach those donors is that I've had conversations where I heard things like, yeah, it's great. I mean, of course, I want to make donations, but first, I don't know where to. So if I'm willing to make a donation in crypto, like I don't even know who is accepting it. I know of 2-3 organizations that, of course, you can hear through your friends or family that this given organization accepts crypto, and that if you're willing to make a donation, it's easy like that. But like actually trying to make sure that any organization trying to raise funds can do it, let's say, regardless of whether they would trying to get funds from traditional donors or from donors who would give in crypto, like just trying to make the connection a bit easier and make sure that it just becomes more normal for crypto wealth holders to make donations to charities, and for charities or social enterprises to raise funds from a very broad set of donors. So trying to just make the connection between both much more obvious, so that in the end you don't have to ask yourself questions about how to find those potential crypto donors or not, because they're just they're anonymous for sure, but you know that they know how to find you. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess what we also want to do with this talk, I mean, like, for example, I'm not from the philanthropy space, for example, so I don't know as much as the two of you know, obviously, in that space, but like what we wanted to maybe like spark also a little bit is maybe there are actually some like smaller tools or some ways already that are out there in DeFi or like in the crypto space that can be used by those organizations. It's just like to like test it and like try it out. It could be like a small project, but just to get like the foot in the door, and like not be afraid of that space, even though it has a lot of new terms, is super fast, is very anonymous, but it's what we want to bring across is that that's definitely worth bringing those two worlds together.
I would have one question, and again, thank you for sharing with us what you envision, how you would do it, like what are some of the practices already out there. What I'm really curious about is, Lorelei, you were showing what you called a financial gap that you're operating in, and I'm really curious to understand maybe a little bit better about the why. Why is crypto smarter or the better solution? Could you expand on that again a little bit?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily smarter. I think it's one way, and it's one interesting way. And I think there are two aspects in this. So when you see just the sheer financial gap, it just means you should be able to leverage funds from anywhere. And you should be able to also, so that was basically what we're trying to highlight, that there's a lot of wealth in that space, and that would be great to put it to good use. But then if you just take this other side, and this is the slide that you're seeing at the moment, there's more to crypto than just the money itself. There's just the whole tooling behind it and the infrastructure that can be used. Because what we're trying to do in the end is to make sure that more funds can easily reach impactful organizations so that they can do their work. And the money, I mean, it has to go beyond traditional philanthropy. It has to go beyond just people making donations. Because as rich as people are individually or with their foundations, there's just not enough resources. So you need to make it much easier for anyone to contribute, and also just for commercial capital providers. And what we think is that there are really interesting tools that are being developed in the DeFi space that could be used to actually create more innovative. Hope you can hear me. I feel like there is a catastrophe happening in the background. But yeah, we think that those tools can also be used to pool more capital more easily. So for instance, what you see here, if we're talking about not just grants, but impact investing, having platforms that enable to pool funds from large sets of donors. So not just, setting up a traditional fund in a traditional way and going individually to all your potential investors, and then doing the processes individually to get the money to then start an impact fund, for instance. There are tools that are being developed who would make it much easier to automate the KYC processes, or to just reach much larger investors in more geographies without having so many legal burdens, that would enable you to just increase the pools of capital that you can source from, and to fundraise just more largely, and to there's just a lot of reflections on innovative financing structure, on how do we bundle philanthropic capital together with commercial capital to basically create pools of capital that are more or less risk tolerant, and that's basically just increase the resources that are available to charities or to social businesses. That's basically finding structures so that a traditional commercial investor who is only really looking at what's the money I'm getting out of it at the end of the day, and how risky is it, to just make it more attractive and simpler for this kind of investors to jump on the impact investing space, or just getting more involved in the impact space generally. That makes sense. So crypto is one way, not the best way, but definitely a very interesting set of tools that we should make sure to leverage.
Maybe just quickly, thank you for that, Lorelei. Just to expand on that is, and me not understanding a great deal at all about crypto and Bitcoin for that matter, is what would help me a lot is like one very rather simple example on a small organization sitting in a remote space. Let's go to Sri Lanka, because Avinash touched on a beautiful talk in the first session of this afternoon in this space about his dream factory academy that he's setting up, and how would it help very local efforts. And in a way, I'm coming a little bit from the smart. I'm coming from a mindset point of view, like the type of donors that use this vehicle. I would assume, and it's a pure assumption, they would be closer to some of the activity. There would be a greater understanding on what is going on. So coming back to Avinash and his type of incubator, that tech incubator that he's setting up for peace building. My assumption would be those people have a greater greater proximity. They're closer to this type of an initiative. So this is a little bit where my question came from.
That's super interesting, and I guess, I mean, there's a lot of other discussion around that on the topic of, yeah, just basically providing more access to financing options and making it just more direct for anyone to fund a project that is close to their heart, not having to go to the bank, not having to set up your own investing entity in a company in a country X when you're based in country Y. So just the disintermediation generally is definitely one of the really interesting aspects of payments and cryptocurrency in general. So I can imagine that in that case, yeah, would also be just a very interesting tool to explore. Cool. I mean, it's not a problem if we finish a bit earlier. I think we're all going to be happy to have the end of our week. But I think if you don't have any more questions.
Is there any last questions from anyone? Or if it's just a thank you to Leah and Lorelei in the chat, or even spoken out loud. Jürgen, maybe you want to, speaking for all of the audience, say a quick thank you. I'll put you on the spot here.
Okay, thanks very much. I really appreciated this. I think it's you go where you are also. What I took from your last quotes is that you go where the money goes. So crypto is just one market where a lot of money floats around, and it's a very good source for philanthropic investments as well. So, but very interesting session. I was having a travel day today. I have to play a lot of I have to watch a lot of it on YouTube, I'm afraid, but that was really nice one.
And yeah, thanks for your comments, and thanks for the discussion as well.
Hope it was as interesting for the others.
Leah and Lorelei, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing also your dreams, I would say, and wishing you all a very happy and healthy weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.